Hi, I'm Mary Valamides, and I'm going to go over the third 6 weeks curriculum preview for math in grade 5. The very first day of the third 6 weeks, you'll be giving the CBA for math on November 14th. The blueprints are in Eduphoria. So after you get the CBA, you'll have 1 day to finish 5.4b, and then you'll begin the Unit 5 on graphing and data analysis. Now, this particular unit, you'll notice that I've asked you to go between Module 10 and 14. You'll notice that you'll have 2 days with Module 10 where you're going to be explaining number patterns in a table. 10.1 should be easy for the kids, other than you have a rule. They should be able to read tables, but you're giving them a rule and you're having them trying to find the table that matches the rule. And then on 10.2, they're going to be learning the difference between an additive and multiplicative pattern seen in the table only. Then you'll go to Module 14 so that the kids will understand how to plot ordered pairs. This is a new concept for 5th graders. They've never been introduced to this before, so we have to go to Module 14 to learn about ordered pairs and how to graph. Then after that, they'll go back to Module 10, and now they'll be able to identify the additive and multiplicative patterns in a graph. So that's 10.3, and they'll be able to go back to now Module 14 because now they want to be able to write and graph ordered pairs in a coordinate grid. And then they finish with 10.4, graphing an additive or multiplicative pattern. So you'll have to go between Module 10 and 14 so that the kids will be able to progress through all of these lessons. 5.4c, as we get started with Module 10.1 and 10.2, 5.4c talks about generating a numerical pattern when given a rule in the form as y equals ax or y equals x plus 1. Notice we're not going to do the last portion of and graph because they don't know that part yet. So we're going to first start with that. And you'll see on the test, in STAR test, they were given an item where they had to generate the pattern when they're given the rule. Now, this does not exist in our Texas Go Math. Texas Go Math instead has you finish the table. So you don't actually generate a table or pick a table that's correct. So I would suggest that you do this activity instead, or you can use the engaging math activity that's available in the pacing guide. But with this activity, the kids, you give them just a rule. You can give each student a different rule. And then the kids are to create an example and non-example of the rule. Then you'll use the 1-3-6 protocol, where after the students have worked on their own and have created their example and non-example of a table for each of those for that one rule, then they go and share with 2 other people. They create a group of 3, and they share their work. And here they will revise and edit their work as the kids come together and discuss whether what they've made is correct. Then they join with another group of 3, and the kids have to justify the correct answer. So this is one way of getting the kids involved in making their own rules. Now the additive versus multiplicative patterns, this is in 10.2 actually. It starts in 10.1 a little bit with the rule, but then in 10.2 you actually put a label to it. So you can see that the green table is an additive pattern because you add 8 to it, whereas the yellow table is a multiplicative pattern because you multiply 8 to the x. Now, looking at this one, you can ask the kids which one would be additive and which one would be multiplicative, and explain why. And you can see that the first one is the multiplicative pattern, the second one is the additive pattern, because the first one is 3 times x, therefore it's multiplicative, whereas the additive pattern is x plus 12. So here the kids can create the rule for each of these. And then you can ask them which one would be the equation y equals ax and which one would be the equation y is equal to x plus a. And then hopefully they'll be able to identify that because they have the rule to go by. Now on STAR Test, you'll see that this was the item that the kids had to do. Notice the kids had 82% mastery, which is great. But again, they don't have something where they can choose the actual table in Texas Go Math. Here's another item with 5.4c. Notice the kids do have to be able to read the graph. That's why we have to now go to Module 14 and learn about graphing. And here's a released item. Notice the tables are going horizontally on this one. Now, when we're learning about graphing, we have some terms we need to learn: input and output, as well as XY, X-coordinate, Y-coordinate, X-axis, Y-axis, and origin. So 5.8a will be the first text that we will go over, because here the kids will learn about all parts of the different graphs, such as this important vocabulary: the coordinate plane, axes, origin, X-axis, Y-axis, X-coordinate, and Y-coordinate. And you can use this slide if you like to help introduce these terms to the kids. Now, 5.8 could be 5.88, could be in different increments. It could be increments of 1, 2, or it can be with decimals or with fractions. Now, just to remember, decimals and fractions are not given in Texas Go Math, so you might look at Engaging Math instead. Here's an item from STAR testing that the kids had to use where they described the process, as well as 5.8b, which talks about the process. Here are some terms that you could use with the kids. And here it shows examples of the process used in graphing these particular coordinates. And then you can have the kids tell you the last two coordinates. Whenever you're graphing, I just want to remind you, you have the gridded side of those two-sided whiteboards that the kids can actually create their own graphs on. 14.2 and 3, when they're graphing coordinate in a coordinate plane, this comes from 5.8c. And this was actually the 5th highest item. Notice it is using fractions. On the clarifier, we had an item similar to this because it was a released item. Notice that this uses process standard D, where the kids are communicating. They're choosing the right ordered pair that would go with the 4th vertex of a rhombus. Notice the kids scored 81% on this. On the clarifier, because it was a released STAR item, notice it was very similar to this item, and you used a trapezoid instead. So both of them, notice the 4-sided figures. They're trying to find the missing vertex. Kids did well on this. However, when we're using process standard E, which is on a higher level, it's more on the creative side, on the highest level of Bloom's, notice here they have to create and use the representation. So this was the 3rd lowest scoring item, where the kids were given the directions and had to actually create their own grid or their own ordered pairs on the graph, and then select the item that's located at 7.7, which information would be true. Now, Module 10, 3, and 4, now we're going to go into 5.4d, where we're going to recognize the difference between the additive and multiplicative patterns. So now we're going to go back to Module 10, and notice here we're going to discuss the 3 ways to show the additive or multiplicative pattern. Notice the kids have already been exposed to the table and the rule. Now we're going to talk about the graph. We're going to add that to it. So if it does not go through the origin, it would be an additive pattern. Of course, the origin is 0, 0. If it does go through the origin, it will be a multiplicative pattern. Here's an item on the STAR test. Notice the kids could immediately scratch off F and G because this graph is not going through the origin, so F and G could not possibly be the correct answer. Now for 5.4c, I want to show you now a few examples of what you could use in your classroom. Here we're talking about the multiplicative rule, and you have some examples here, as well as an example using a graph with a table. Then for the additive pattern, here's an example. And notice it does not pass through the origin, so the ordered pairs would not have 0, 0. And here's an example with a graph and a table. The way you can help with an additive pattern is to have that process standard in between, where you notice that here we're adding 20 each time. So 1 plus 20 would be 21. 2 plus 20 would be 22. We're adding, so it's the additive pattern. We're also not going through the origin, so that on the graph. So that tells you too that it's the additive pattern. But with the multiplicative pattern, we are multiplying. So it's multiplying times 20. So that 1 times 20 is 20, 2 times 20 is 40, and notice we are going through the origin on the graph. Now, part of the second week and third week in December, we're going to be making frequency tables, bar graphs, and dot plots. And so these will be coming from modules 15 and 16. Notice that categorical data will be done with bar graphs or frequency tables, whereas numerical data will be using fractions or decimals with dot plots or stem and leaf plots. With this, we also have coupled 5.9c, where they're going to be solving 1- and 2-step problems. Here we're going to be using the frequency table and dot plot, the bar graph, stem and leaf plot, or a scatter plot. Now, scatter plot is new to a 5th grader. They had stem and leaf in 4th grade, and the other graphs in either 3rd grade or younger. However, scatter plot will be introduced in 5th grade. So, looking at 5.9a, to discuss the differences between categorical and numerical data, I've given you the definitions and examples here. With categorical data, of course, we're looking at categories. So, favorite color, do you have a brother? They're not numbers. But numerical data can be counted. It's discrete or it could be continuous. So how many hours, how old were you when you lost your first tooth? So notice numbers are involved with numerical data. So here in 5.9a, notice we're using bar graphs with categorical data as to what kind of games you like, whether it's winter games, kickball, and then bounce house, or anything else. Here's an example using a frequency table. And then after winter break, we're going to be making and analyzing dot plots. Notice now we're going to be using fractions. And the kids did very well on an item that did use that on the START test. Then after winter break, we're going to be doing stem and leaf plots and scatter plots. Here are some definitions for you that you can use on stem and leaf plots. And here are some examples. So notice out here the stem is the whole number, and the fraction portion, or looking at the second one, the decimal portion, would be the leaves. So, for example, 5 3/4 is how you would read this first one, whereas down here at the bottom, 5 75/100 would be the first one. So we have 4 examples of 5 7/100, and here we have on the top 6, and the zeros represent that this is just the whole number 6. As well as here the zeros with the decimals represented would just be the whole number 7. So there would be 5 7s. So 5.9b represent discrete paired data on a scatter plot. If it's discrete, they are not connected because they're not associated with each other. They don't depend on each other. The data is finite and they have distinct values. So notice here on 5.9b, we have a table with a graph. And this is a sample scatter plot of what the graph would look like with the accompanying table. Again, we will use 5.9c to solve 1- and 2-step problems using this. So I've provided you with a few examples. Now, these texts are the texts that we will be covering. And again, here's a few examples with the scatter plot. 5.9b there was an item, sample item. Notice the kids actually did very well on this because they can represent data very well. Notice this one was our very highest scoring item. Here they had a little bit more difficulty because there's another step. They had to talk about the difference between the highest score and the lowest score. This was our 6th lowest item. This too is multi-step because the kids had to figure out what fraction of the students in this class have two or more pets. So we're talking about this portion of the entire graph. there are 16 dots out of 24. But notice 16, 24, they're not down here. So the kids then have to find the simplest form, so they have to reduce their fraction to 2/3. So C is the correct answer. So there are quite a few steps that they had to do here, and therefore it was the 6th lowest. If the kids are just representing information, for the last 2 years they've done very well on that part of the task. But whenever it's another step that's involved, if it's multi-step, that's when they find difficulty with the graphs. So try to make sure you add that to the kid. Make sure that the kids are exposed to a lot of multi-step problems. Notice on this particular item they had to find the missing bar graph that would match the information given, and the kids scored 63% on this. After that, you just have a couple of days to multiply fractions and whole numbers. This is 5.31, and notice if you use that term groups of in the place of the multiplication sign, if you have 2/3 groups of 15, notice you have to have 15 dots, and they are in groups of 3, and we only want 2 of those 3 groups. So that would be 10. 2/3 times 4, the same thing. We would only want 2 of the 3 in the groups of 4. So we have them in thirds, and we only want 2 of each of those, but we have 4 groups of them, and therefore we have, our answer would be 8/3, or in simplest terms, 2 2/3. Now, if you use the algorithm, it works, but the problem is this particular text says to represent. So notice on 5.31, it's our 12th lowest item, the kids had to choose the model. So they have to learn how to represent this information. Again, on this one, the kids were given, this is a star released item. We don't know how the kids did on this one, but notice they could have words given as well. If you don't have your UPS check poster, please contact me so that you can get it. It's one that I'd like to see in your classrooms, in the front of your room if possible, so that the kids can look at it and refer to it. You should also have your strategies poster. So that way if the kids get stumped working a problem, they can pick a strategy. Now, just a reminder that I have put a few new things in Eduphoria for you. This is a little sheet that has 4 on one sheet if you want it to use it. You can actually cut them out, put them in the kids' journals so they can interview each other using these questions, or you can have it taped on their table as well, their desk. So 2 different ways to do it. And there will be cards in Eduphoria as well with these questions that the kids can use to interview each other when they're looking at each other's problems. Also, this has been updated what teachers say and students say and do so that you would have a more step-by-step how to go through UPS Check. So these additional resources, when you go to Yearly Content Documents, then find District Instructional Resources, click UPS Check, and then the gear at the bottom, and then you'll be able to see all the different attachments at the bottom. The new vocabulary. Notice that these terms over here should be reviewed for your kids. They should have been exposed to them, decimals in 4th grade, but everything else they should have been exposed to prior. Notice that we have some new vocabulary, however, this 6 weeks that you might want to do some great activities with the kids. So a few ideas for activities, is baseball. We can play baseball, especially since we have our World Series going on. Charades or hot seat. So these will be available for you to look over and see if any of these appeal to you. Thank you for listening today. If you have any questions, please call me or email me. Thank you. Have a great day.